The endocrines. Comment. The editors of Mind Magazine have been in possession of these very interesting questions and answers for some time, but have withheld publication until our readers might have an opportunity of following carefully the many other aspects of Mr. Spalding's teachings as presented during the past 2 years in this periodical. Today we have somewhat of a technical subject, which is, however, one of very great importance to all, as it deals with the scientific side of spiritual development. The thyroid controls the whole endocrinal system, bringing it into harmony with all of the other glands and the whole glandular system. It is through this development that the spiritual faculties are brought into conscious use. That is, through the stimulation of the thyroid, the spiritual faculties are brought out and correlated. Question. Will you please enumerate the glands for the benefit of those who are not familiar with physiology? Answer. There are 7 of these glands: the pineal, the pituitary, the thyroid, the thymus, the pancreas, the adrenals, and the gonads. The thyroid is the most important. It straddles the trachea with 2 lateral lobes and 1 central lobe. The gonads dominate between 14 and 45. The thyroid especially dominates from 45 onward. It doesn't begin to function until the advent of puberty. The pineal is more or less active until that period of life. The true outer function of the pineal is to delay the advent of puberty until about the 14th year, or until the body becomes strong enough. Many children have more or less spiritual vision for that reason. Many children have very remarkable spiritual insight during their earlier years until this period is reached. Question. What methods do the masters use in stimulating the function of the thyroid? Answer. Later in life, they use a method of stimulating its action by centering on the thyroid. This brings it into physical activity, and it begins to develop to a greater extent right along, feeding the body until it becomes regenerated. They do not use chemicals at all. It is solely by the concentration of thought upon it. Question. What is the influence of oxygen from a master's standpoint? Answer. It is inhaled in a natural way through the breath. It has the greatest stimulating influence. They do not give it otherwise. They give exercises to stimulate the respiratory organs in order to take in and assimilate more and more oxygen all of the time. Question. The control of the body is, as we understand it, through the thyroid in relation to this respiration of the body, the influence of the thyroxin. Answer. Yes, it plays a very important part in the oxidation of the material that is thrown off, and also in the bringing of the oxygen into a condition through which the body can use it, putting it into the bloodstream as well. Question. What is the influence attained through the interstitial cells of the gonads that bring about rejuvenation, which you cannot bring about by an increased activity of the thyroid? There must be some way known to bring about a rejuvenation of the body by increasing the activity of the thyroid, but already marked evidences of rejuvenation have been accomplished through the interstitial gonads, by gland transplantation, and by the ligation method of Stenich. Answer. Still, there is no permanent rejuvenation in that way. But where your thyroid is brought to a certain activity, to the point where spiritual perception takes place, you have your rejuvenation that becomes active and permanent. Your rejuvenation is then permanent. You will find that in gland transplantation, or in any purely physical method, there is a breaking down period, whereas with the spiritual development, there is no such breaking down at all. Where rejuvenation is brought about through the development and use of the thyroid in connection with spiritual activity, it is evidently permanent. There is no need to resort to the gonads at all. They claim in the East that the spiritual activity can be carried right on from youth. They give specific training to a considerable extent in that. Even in Calcutta University, it is known as spiritual transmutation. Question. Is Emil in a body that has lasted him 400 years? Answer: yes, over 400 years. It is apparently as young as it ever was. Question: how does that body differ in the texture of the flesh? Answer: it is finer. You would recognize a finer condition, but at the same time there is no difference really in the cellular construction, apparently. Although a higher state of vibration is maintained, you are not so conscious of this as you are of the facial expression that is immediately noticeable. There is not a sign of old age. Usually the hands are the first sign of old age, and their hands never show any age. Then, of course, there is no facial expression of old age. The hair is well preserved. In many of them, the hair is never gray. Question: take some of the younger individuals that you have mentioned, who are about 75 or 80 years of age, and look their age, and changes come about in them so that in the course of a few years they become 40 or 50. Was the influence spiritual, and was it working through the endocrine system? Answer: as soon as the spiritual understanding is stimulated to any extent, the endocrine system begins to operate, and, as they say, it comes into its own proper activity. It is just harmonized and speeded up in its action. Each individual still moves in the direction of creating this youth. We have seen that accomplished in a very short time. We had one very remarkable instance. One of the old coolies, who was with my grandfather, and who at that time was an old man, came and asked to go with us on one of our expeditions. I said, "No, you are too old." Emil heard me turn down his request and said, "Let him go if he wants to." Upon his return, his friends failed to recognize him. His hair was dark, and he had lost his age completely. He was an ordinary coolie, for all that we knew, travel-worn and quite decrepit before setting out. He is still living and retains his youthful appearance to this day. Question: then one method of rejuvenating the thyroid after the age of 45 is to feed the physical body on vitamin-producing food? Answer: yes, it all helps at the beginning. Question: is there then some association between prana and the vitamins? Answer: there is a very close relationship and association. It brings into activity the hormones of the body. The vitamins bring the hormones into activity and increase them. Question: are vitamins more physical than chemical? Answer: yes, they are enzymes and therefore catalyzers. Question: let us relate this subject to fear. In 1918, during the great flu epidemic, was not fear at the bottom of its continuance? Answer: as soon as fear subsided, the epidemic subsided also. If fear is overcome completely, the thyroid will be undisturbed by any negative emotions. Love overcomes fear completely and stimulates the action of the thyroid gland immediately. Question: I have heard of many fakirs and of some men of real spiritual attainment who have eaten nails, glass, and poisons of various sorts, and have survived for a time and then suddenly collapsed. They would go on perhaps for months or years apparently unharmed. X-rays would show no sign of things eaten but a few moments previously. What caused the ultimate collapse in those cases where it has occurred? Answer: the cause is primarily egotism. When an individual comes to the point where he is hypnotized into believing that he is the power which performs so-called miracles, when his personality asserts itself beyond the Christ, within conscious activity, the thyroid ceases to secrete and distribute the antitoxin. Nothing else will destroy the function of the thyroid gland so readily as egotism, which destroys all spiritual activity.